So we're taking a look at the Zuni Bowl and our rolling dip, and we're going to show how these two earthworks interact with each other and are just as useful as the swale. What's going on, everyone? I'm Brandon, and this is the Greening the Desert project. Since the tour and looking over all of the earthworks that we had done along our pathway up to our build site, we had a question regarding a little bit more in depth about the Zuni Bowls and our rolling dips. And I think, going into a little more in depth on the Zuni Bowls, these are forms that are usually in a circular kind of, orientation. So making basically a bowl in the ground or simply just digging a pit into the ground. And these play a pretty big function in sediment catchment as well as harvesting rainwater as well. And I think the added bonus to it is that rolling dips, coupled with the Zuni Bowls, these can greatly improve, just the amount of water that actually is diverted off of a roadway or a pathway. So when it comes to kind of the shape of a Zuni Bowl, there really is no definitive kind of answer that I can give anybody. I mean, for the most part, most of the Zuni Bowls that we'll be doing have the circular shape to them. It's more like a bowl. But they're really interchangeable with the shapes that you can do, because you can accommodate to just the landscape in general. And for the main purpose, like for us using the Zuni Bowls, we're placing these in very strategic spots up top. So a lot of that planning is still in the works. But, along our pathway down here, we've actually planned a lot just because we've already carved somewhat of an outline of our pathway up to the top. But for the part that the Zuni Bowls are playing, they are harvesting water and capturing sediment. It's actually playing a big part in slowing the water down as well, because these bowls are slowly filling up and then they are slowly overfilling and spilling over, basically. And the added benefit to them as well is that they're helping spread the water out. So when we're looking at the form of the Zuni Bowls, it's really interchangeable with the design and kind of the placement of everything. I mean, you can place the Zuni Bowls almost wherever, and I think that's kind of the benefit of them, and almost an advantage is that you really don't need any special tools for them. You don't need the A-frame level, you don't need the contour level like you do with swales. So I think that's kind of the advantage of them, is that they're a little more beginner friendly if you're just getting into earthworks. But, they're simple, but they have a huge impact. And, it's just the bonus that you can place these in a lot more of a diversity of, spots compared to swales. And don't get me wrong, the swales are definitely, a big contributor to a lot of the earthworks that we'll be doing around here. But when we're talking about our pathway, I think especially, these Zuni Bowls are playing a huge role in, basically taking water that's coming on the pathway and letting it soak and settle basically in certain spots that we've placed a lot of these Zuni Bowls. Really isn't, a definitive form, that has to be followed with the Zuni Bowl. I think the advantage of doing, a circular, more rounded kind of Zuni Bowl is that it just basically creates a little more spread on the diversion of water as these fill up and slowly overfill. So, I think that's maybe the main function, but like I said, it's kind of interchangeable because it depends on your needs. You can make these more rectangular, you can make them more oval. You can really make the Zuni Bowls any shape. But I think what is most important is just, the concept that is at play here. And the main, concept of these is slowing, capturing water as well as capturing sediment, and giving a place for water to soak into the ground more so. So it kind of goes into like our values and our goals, with our own properties. And with our property, and our goals, we're trying to soak as much water into the land as possible. So the Zuni Bowls are kind of a multi-utility kind of tool in the earthwork belt, you could say. And I think, that's the biggest play, for us is, slowing as much water and capturing water. And even during, for wintertime as well, the Zuni Bowls are going to be capturing a lot of the snow, any snow that we accumulate, as well as heavy rain, because the shape of it, it is going to be capturing and holding water. It just goes, like I said, with the form, your specific needs and, what you're hoping to accomplish with the Zuni Bowls. And I think this kind of goes with one of our viewers' questions here, asking about, the form and function of, the Zuni Bowl coupled with the rolling dip. So going, with the form of the rolling dip is slightly like a swale, except that about to say the Zuni Bowl, but the rolling dip is not on contour. The rolling dip is usually at an angle and is more angled downward, and the roll of the rolling dip is more for diverting the water where we want, any extra or excess water coming onto the pathway. We want to direct that where we want it to go and where we want it to soak in more. And so we've coupled that with the Zuni Bowl and essentially, kind of replaced, culverts where some people might put culverts. We've kind of mitigated that cost and, that extra work that needs to be done by putting in these Zuni Bowls on either side of the rolling dips. And so that kind of just goes into the function of the Zuni Bowls as well as the rolling dip. All these are meant for, diverting water, and kind of guiding the water where we want it to go to. So for our case, with our pathway, we've put Zuni Bowls on either side of our rolling dip. So because of the slope and the grade of our hill as well, we have water that's traveling down and it will hit one Zuni Bowl and it'll slowly fill up and rise up and over, and then it'll cross over the rolling dip. So with the rolling dip, we've got the Zuni Bowl and we have the rolling dip to help guide the water to the next Zuni Bowl. So we've basically put in 2 sediment catchments at that. So that kind of goes into the function of the Zuni Bowls is the sediment catchment, and keeping sediment from washing away is kind of part of it. We want to try and hold as much of our soil, sediment, any good stuff. We want to hold that on the property. We don't want that just washing down the road, creating mud and muck and all that mess everywhere. So that's kind of a big play with the, just the function of the Zuni Bowls is that they're capturing sediment because of the rocks. And there's plenty of examples on the property here, and examples that anyone can kind of see out in nature as well about the power of rocks and the slowing of water and the capturing of sediment as well. And it's also just part of with the materials, that we do have on the land, we have just the abundance of rocks. So you'll see throughout all of our videos that we're going to be utilizing all the rocks that we can. We've got it utilized up on the build at the Gabion Wallapini. We've utilized a lot of the rocks for our pathway, for building up our ramp up to the top. So that's kind of the beauty of rocks, is that there's that multi-purpose usage to them. So we'll be able to get creative with, check dams and a whole lot of other earthworks that we're doing around here. So it's also just, with our goals that, we want all of our earthworks to interconnect with each other. And that kind of goes with, how we've designed the rolling dips with the Zuni Bowls as well. These are essentially all one piece, and it create the diversity of earthworks that we want to do, but also create the diversity of water harvesting techniques. So essentially, when we're looking at the Zuni Bowl, the main functions of the Zuni Bowl are, sediment catchment as well as water catchment, but also water, slowing the water down. And that is a huge aspect for here, especially because of the monsoon rains that we get. So the placement as well is kind of, it's interchangeable as well. It depends on what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve, and that's where, for our case, we've placed a lot of our Zuni Bowls that we've done so far, across the rolling dips, which are, intermingling with our pathway up to the top. And so we have a whole lot more to go, a whole lot more earthworks to do, a lot more planning that we need to, outline as well. But at least for now, like what we have with some of the Zuni bowls and the rolling dips will at least get things started with diverting water where we want it, soaking at least a bit more water. So that's kind of the pace that we're at right now, is taking things slowly. You know, we've done a little bit, scratched a little bit of outlines coming up our pathway, and obviously we're at the top, and it's kind of the Gabion Wallapini, it's the greenhouse structure that is more important right now, because that is our starting place for us to basically expand outward. That's kind of the nice thing about these Zuni bowls, is that they actually look really nice. They look really natural, and I guess, you know, it's just aesthetically pleasing to look at, you know, just the design of it with just the rocks that we have lying around. But, you know, the function that they play is major, especially when we're talking about the sediment catchment, because with the sediment catchment, you know, as it builds up with sediment, you know, that's kind of the, I'd say maybe the disadvantage, is that there will be maintenance that's required for these, because they're going to fill up with sediment eventually and they won't be able to hold as much water. But I think kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum is that even if they do fill up, you know, with sediment, that sediment is going to be fertile, you know, very rich, you know, kind of soil that's been built up. And then coupled with the rocks and the moisture that's already been built up, you know, if they've been gathering water and filling up, you know, now it's a very moist and fertile place for lots more greenery, you know, a lot more things to grow. And I guess that's kind of the benefit, you know, even if you weren't able to maintenance everything. I think the fact that there'll be more plants that'll start growing, more vegetation that starts growing, that in and of itself is going to harbor, you know, a little bit more water slowing down and a lot more water soakage, especially because we will start getting roots in the ground. We'll have more vegetation that'll start slowing a lot more of even the sediment as well as the water. Even still, even having to maintenance these and clean the sediment out, the sediment that gets cleaned out of these, it's very rich. So, I mean, it's fine, you know, sediment with a little bit of sand, I'm sure, and some gravel maybe. But for the most part, it's really nice, powdery, you know, fine sediment that has a lot of nutrients, a lot of nutritional value. So we can end up adding that stuff to our compost area. We can add it to our garden beds that we are making. We can add these to any of the swales, you know, so that it's kind of, you know, even with the little bit of maintenance, the return in my mind is well worth it, because that's soil that I didn't have to really go out and search for or really take from anywhere else. You know, this is stuff that's accumulated, that's run off with the water, and we're able to harvest it. And I think for, you know, saving money, this could actually save people money on culverts. You know, if you have certain spots that, you know, might require a culvert because of how the water's running over the road or where it is kind of just running in general, you know, this could save, you know, a few $100s even on cost. But I will say this isn't applicable, you know, for really every situation. You know, you can't necessarily replace a culvert with the Zuni bowl and a rolling dip everywhere, because there might be certain spots where there's a whole lot of water that is coming that way that is just really hard for a Zuni bowl and a rolling dip to take care of. I mean, unless there's a lot of, you know, creativity and you know, just the earthworks themselves are adapted to it. You know, a lot more heavy duty, more bigger rocks, deeper Zuni bowls, maybe a little bit more bigger of a rolling dip. So I guess that's kind of the nice thing, though, at the same time, is that these earthworks are customizable. You know, they're not set in stone. No pun intended. But you know, you can make these any size, you can make them any depth. We actually have at the beginning of our driveway path, those Zuni bowls, you know, are about 3 foot, 3.5 foot deep. You know, they come up pretty high up on my legs. So those can actually hold a fair amount of water. And just, you know, for the sake of our pathway leading up, you know, where I'm standing even, it is a slight downhill. So most of our water is already coming off of the road, but we can actually kind of make plans and get ideas on how we can slow the water down further, so we can have, you know, a huge section of Zuni Bowls that one just keeps filling up and overfills to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. And I mean, it'll look really cool, but it'll also catch a lot of sediment. And then, you know, eventually towards the bottom, that actually might turn out a lot more clearer water that, you know, you could use for animals or, you know, anything like that. You know, and I say that these earthworks are actually heavily overlooked because you actually can really hardly find Zuni Bowls as well as rolling dips on videos or Google searches. You can find Bill Zedek. He's kind of the guy that has popularized, you know, made a little bit more well-known of the Zuni Bowls, as well as just kind of rock diversion, you know, pieces. And, you know, his work is mainly in washes and kind of riverbanks as well. So that's a little bit where his ideas come from. So he actually makes bigger size Zuni Bowls. And that's where I say, you know, the size and the form are kind of interchangeable. So we can make these as big as we want, or we can make them as small as we want. It just depends on the specific needs and, you know, your specific goals. And just the other advantage with the Zuni Bowls, you know, as the sediment fills up, and even if you're cleaning out all of the sediment, you know, I think what happens over time as well is that lots of plants and vegetation actually starts growing in between the rocks. And which is you know, the plants and the vegetation growing in the rocks is actually a really good thing, partially because, you know, we're bringing more vegetation out, but also because that vegetation that grows in between the rocks, that is going to in turn help hold in a lot of those rocks, and it's going to start basically creating a little micro environment, you know, where we might get certain kinds of plants and weeds, you know, or different kinds of vegetation, as well as grasses that grow in here. But the return is that all of that vegetation is going to help hold the rocks in. It's going to help hold in that soil so that we don't get any more that, you know, flows off. But that's going to do similar like with the rocks, but any vegetation that grows is also going to help capture more sediment and help slow down the water even further. So that's where, you know, the kind of interchangeable aspect of these earthworks is that we can get these basic concepts down. We can understand, you know, the formation and the function of these earthworks. But when it really comes down to it, it's up to our own creativity and kind of our own observation to look at how we can piece all of these together, whether they interconnect like we have with the Zuni Bowl and the rolling dip kind of combined, or, you know, whether we combine like a Zuni Bowl with a swale so that when the swale overfills, it overfills into the Zuni Bowl, which the Zuni Bowl slowly fills up and then rises up and over, and then slowly spreads and disperses that water out a lot more, as opposed to the water just running in a straight stream, gathering momentum and cutting and eroding away the earth. In our Zuni Bowl here, we have kind of where the gravel is, that's our exit point. So we've kind of stacked the rocks more on the side and, you know, at least a little bit higher. And then we've left where the gravel is, that is the opening for the water to escape. So we've left the rocks a little bit lower so that the water, when it does overfill, that's more than likely the path that it's going to take. That's why we have the gravel. So we'll end up actually graveling this whole pathway, as well as the rolling dip, you know, basically to create the stability in the rolling dip so it doesn't get continuously packed down and keep dragging mud all over the place. But then it's also for when the Zuni Bowl does overfill, this is the path that the water is going to take, but we're also using the gravel just to mitigate further erosion on the roadway itself. So that's where, you know, it's more with the rolling dips that the formation is a little bit more important, because the placement is kind of key and just the direction of the water flow is another aspect. But the formation is kind of key, and the direction and the angle that you have it at is important, because like I said, you don't want to make a speed bump. You want to make a smooth transition that almost feels like nothing, you know, just about when you're driving over it. A special shout out to our Green Guardian members. Really appreciate your guys' continued support, and it's gonna really give us the jump start, and I can't wait to get into planting all of the trees and everything else that we will be planting in your guys' names. And we're by all means not done at all with this quite yet. You know, we still have a whole lot of gravel to lay. I mean, essentially this whole pathway is going to be lined with rocks and gravel, you know, to the best of our ability. And, you know, that goes with the rolling dips as well. So it's still a work in progress, as well as, you know, it will be, you know, something to observe and keep an eye out as we get more rain, as we get into the monsoon season and we start getting more downpours. So with the Zuni Bowls and the rolling dips, I mean, that's just the other added benefit to these is they are a sustainable option, especially because we have the abundance of material. We have the rocks, we have the gravel. It's just really for us about collecting it. If you have the materials, you know, might as well use them. It's free and they're right there. The water is filling up these bowls and it's slowly rising, and it's the fact that it's not just a straight stream, you know, it's something that's slowly filling and then overfilling. So we've slowed the water, but it's also the fact that the way that the bowls are, that it's helping spread the water out a little more over the landscape and not creating more erosion on the landscape. And that's just part of our goal, is penetrating more water into our soil, absorbing more, and getting just the landscape to hold more water in general. And since we're speaking of things that aren't very well known, since we're going to be moving up top and getting all of our stuff situated up top here, I've got to get busy on few projects for us to stay up there. And the first project is going to be